Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Welcome back for another video. I hope you're having a wonderful day, a wonderful Tuesday, despite all the volatility in the crypto world. But $500,000 Bitcoin, let's go ahead and dive on into this $500,000 Bitcoin. It is closer than you think. This is kind of a continuation of yesterday's video where I talked about my price targets are cooked. And it's essentially that if we're talking about 2024 and 2025, they're too aggressive. And if we're talking about beyond that, after the great debasement, they are too conservative. $155,000 Bitcoin, if you are willing to be patient, it is too conservative. Okay, so there are a few things I want to talk about in this video. And the first thing I want to talk about, I haven't talked about this in a long time. It's really fascinating. Okay, so Bitcoin launched on January 3rd, 2009. Despite wild swings in volatility, it has pretty much been up only. And then we had an extraordinary event, and I'm fast forwarding right now to 2020, because 2020 was the COVID crash. But what is significant about that isn't necessarily the COVID crash itself, but how governments responded to the COVID crash, how central banks responded to the COVID crash, which is kind of government, kind of private entity. Okay, so we saw in the United States, and this happened all over the world, this massive injection of liquidity. Rates were dropping at the time, slow and steady, and Bitcoin was struggling a little bit in that rate environment of just rates dropping, just struggling a little bit. And then the COVID crash came and these rates went to zero. And then we saw stimulus. We saw these insane PPP loans. We saw quantitative easing again. And we saw what would be described as a fertile breeding ground for Bitcoin to go from $3,500 all the way up a year and a half later to $69,000. And so do you know what happened at the same time as that? Is the amount of Bitcoin available to buy on exchanges peaked. It had been going up because of, supply at the time before that halving was 1,800 Bitcoin mined per day. So the amount of Bitcoin being bought and removed from circulation was not equivalent to 1,800 a day. And the amount of Bitcoin on exchanges peaked in March of 2020, the week of the COVID crash. And so all these people got their $1,200 stimulus checks and just bought $1,200 of Bitcoin. And if they held all the way to the top, they saw that $1,200 turn into $24,000, something like that. And I'm sure that plenty of people invested a lot more than that, invested into altcoins. But ever since then, it's not in a straight line. We have been gradually going down. The amount of Bitcoin available to buy has been gradually going down. And there is a point in the future, especially with these spot Bitcoin ETFs having launched, when you are actually not going to be, right now we have these glory days. We're going to look back at these days fondly as like, I could have gone on an exchange and bought as much Bitcoin as my heart desired. There is coming a day when that's not going to be possible. Now, am I talking about the 2020s? Probably not. I would expect sometime in the 2030s, but I would also expect this supply crunch to take more and more of an effect as fiat currencies around the world are dying. And so we don't need to get to zero Bitcoin available on exchanges for that supply crunch to take effect. We get to 1.5 million Bitcoin available on exchanges, 1 million Bitcoin available, 500,000 Bitcoin available on exchanges, and we're going to start feeling the pressure. Did you know it takes $93 million more of buys of Bitcoin? This is actually from 2021, so it's actually probably even lower than that. But $93 million worth of buys, a $93 million net gain in buys to move the price by 1%. So when you think of market cap, you're not thinking, all right, we got to get to a $2 trillion market cap from $1 trillion. We have to buy $1 trillion worth of Bitcoin. That's not how that works. I've seen lots of people make that mistake before. That's not how that works. It is, at least according to Bank of America, 2021, $93 million because of how illiquid the supply is, because so many people are hodling Bitcoin. It takes $93 million in net buys to move the price 1%. And there's going to be a time when that's 50 million in net buys, and there's going to be a time when that's 25 million and 10 million. And there's going to be a time when if you want to buy $1 million of Bitcoin, you're going to have a really hard time. So right now, it's really difficult for major institutions, for nation states to buy heavy amounts of Bitcoin. Like I've heard rumors, it's just rumors that Qatar wanted to buy $500 billion of Bitcoin. I'm sorry, Qatar, that's not happening without you moving the price very dramatically. Even OTC, that's not happening. But there is a day coming when it's not just Qatar that's going to be struggling, or Qatar, whatever you want to call it. It's going to be just general people who have a decent amount of money that they want to put into Bitcoin. There's 21 million Bitcoin that will ever exist. There's over 50 million millionaires in the world. If every millionaire in the world decided they wanted to buy Bitcoin, one Bitcoin, they wanted to hold one Bitcoin, I'm sorry, it's not happening. And so do you see the effects of what happens as Bitcoin enters the general consciousness as something like, oh yeah, we really need to be holding on to these things? There's going to be a decent amount of people who will be left on the sidelines. And I have a feeling that you and I are probably going to be among the first people who are going to be left on the sidelines. So now's the time. Now's the time-ish, you know. All right, I'm not excited about 2025. But what is inevitable is the next leg up in terms of debasement of our fiat currencies. And so somebody, one of you, Ollie, you know who you are, you encouraged me to watch this 2-hour Raoul Pal video. And he talks about he just puts to flesh words that I have been thinking a lot. He talks about the next leg up of debasement. And I want to put that chart up right next to me here in 3, 2, 1. There you go. And I want to tell you the difference between myself and Raoul Pal is that he thinks that it's going to happen sooner rather than later. I think it's going to happen later. And I think that 2025, we're going to grind down a little bit. And then we're going to have a perfect opportunity to buy cheap Bitcoin. And it's going to be your best opportunity of the decade. And where's Bitcoin going to be at that time? Let me just throw out $35,000. The 200-week simple moving average, which is typically a marker of a bear market bottom, is at $37,000. But there's been plenty of times when we've gone below. I could see Bitcoin going to about $30,000 to $35,000, and that's going to be an amazing buying opportunity. And then on the other side of that is the injection of liquidity that Raoul Pal and myself that we're both anticipating, just at different times. You see the orange line there. That's my estimation. And if it goes more according to the orange line than his line, then the way it plays itself out is, difficult times for just a little bit of time. A year isn't a long period of time. And then after that, we would see something similar. Remember, Bitcoin during the COVID crash went down to $3,500 and it went up to $69,000. If Bitcoin is at $35,000 and then all this liquidity is injected into the system, $155,000, I'm sorry, that is too conservative. I'm not sorry. Why would I apologize to any of you? But does that mean we go to $690,000 because Bitcoin is 10 times the amount that it was during the COVID crash? I'm not going to say $690,000, but what I'm telling you is under this scenario, if this is how it plays out, we don't have the typical 4-year halving cycle. Yes, $500,000 Bitcoin, especially with what we're seeing with fund managers now opening up the books to Bitcoin with the spot Bitcoin ETFs. What happens on the other side of that is something significant, and I would not rule out at all $500,000 Bitcoin. And that's another reason why my price targets are toast. Okay, because they're either too low or too high, and there may be both. Lots and lots of them are too low, lots and lots of them are too high. But Bitcoin, it is probably too low before the next halving. But that is all I have for today. I hope you have a wonderful day, a wonderful rest of your week. Hit that subscribe button, turn on that notification button, and I will see you in another video